In this lesson, we'll walk through the process of creating our own custom shading network here inside of Maya. Okay, great. So go ahead and open up the Lesson 10 Begin file from the Scenes folder within your project files. You'll find a scene that looks something like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up my render view so I can show you exactly what we're going to be doing. In this particular scene, the materials have already been created for kind of these chrome balls as well as this gold sculpture in the center. We're going to create the material for these green marbles and walk through that process in this lesson. So we'll go ahead and close out of this for right now, and let's open up the Hypershade and get started. So let's see here. The first thing we should probably do is go ahead and create a new material for these particular marbles. I'm going to go ahead and choose a blend to do this. And in order to assign this to all of the marbles that are missing a material currently, let's go ahead and shift select all of these gray marbles, just like so. We'll now come over and right-click on this material and assign that material to our selection here. And what we could do is we can come over here and just double-click on the material and rename this to something like marbles_matte for material. Fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and maximize my Hypershade by hitting the space bar here. And one thing I like to do when I'm building a shading network sometimes is once I have my surface material down here and I'm ready to work with that, I like to hide the tabs up here. We can do that simply by clicking on this button here. And you can see that it maximizes our work area. All right, great. So the first thing I'd like to start with is the bump map, because if you remember in this image, the bump map is really dictating where the colors differ. So we need to establish where these little broken pieces or these little crater pieces are. So let's come over here to our materials, and I'm going to grab a 3D texture. Now these are a little different than the textures that we've looked at previously, but I'll show you here in just a moment. Let's go ahead and grab a rock texture. Go ahead and shift click on those and drag them over here, and I'm going to go ahead and middle click this guy and drop it and connect it to our bump map. Fantastic. So we'll go ahead and kind of arrange these guys just like so. Now with the current texture, if we go ahead and double click on that, you can see we have some kind of a red color applied here as well as sort of a white color. Now I'm going to switch these. Let's go ahead and turn this one all the way to black so we get completely black and white information. And I'm also going to make some adjustments here to kind of the other attributes here as far as the grain size. I'm going to set that up to a value of maybe 0.5, something like that. And for the diffusion, I'm going to set that all the way to 0. So you can see what that did is it makes it to where it's a crisp line instead of kind of a diffused line. For mix ratio, I'm going to set that to a value of 0.75. So we end up with something that looks like this. Now before we go any further, let's go ahead and select this node here. This is a place 3D texture node. 3D textures work a little differently than 2D textures. If we come back over here to our perspective view and we go ahead and hit the 4 key on our keyboard to go to a wireframe, look what we can have down here inside kind of the default Maya grid. If I just frame that with the F key, you can see here we have this little cube that gets created when I have this place 3D texture node. Basically this cube controls how that texture looks. Now we're not going to get too deep into 3D textures, but again, if you'd like to learn more about that, let's go ahead and just check out our Utilizing Shading Networks course. We'll go ahead and go a lot deeper in that course and learn about textures like these. But for this course, I'm going to go ahead first and scale this guy up. Let me go ahead and go back to a shaded view by hitting the 5 key. And we'll just zoom back out. And we'll go ahead and scale this guy up to, I don't know, something like that. I'm actually going to come in here and use a size that I already have written down here. I'm going to use a scale of 5. There we go. Fantastic. So now I've adjusted my camera and I really don't want to do that, so I'm going to hit the open bracket key a couple of times here so we can go back to the current, or the original camera position. Fantastic. So now one thing you may have noticed is that we can't see the bump map on these spheres right now. In order to view this inside of our viewport, we need to go in and enable a texture preview, and we can do that simply by tapping the 6 key on our keyboard. Once that's done, you can see here, now I can see the bump map information. Exactly what I need. So at this point, I'm going to come back over here to my Hypershade and continue working on this shading network. So this particular node right here is pretty important. It's defining kind of where the bump map information is based on this placement node. So I'm going to go ahead and utilize this exact same texture here, and I'm going to duplicate this by hitting Control D. So I have a rock number 2. Now we need to connect a placement node, and if we want this particular node to fall in the exact same place as this one, we need to use the same node or configure it exactly the same. So we can just middle click and drag and connect that to the default input there, and you can see now this placement node is controlling both rock textures. Fantastic. So at this point, if I again double click on this, you can see my color scheme and how we have that configured. We're going to replace those colors here in just a moment, but I'll go ahead and middle click and connect that to the color of the material. Now when I jump back over here to my perspective view, you can see we have black inside kind of those holes, and we have white on the surface. Exactly what we're looking for here. Now, just because those are the colors currently doesn't mean that we can't connect another texture into these two inputs right here. So let's come over and grab a stucco right here. There we go. We'll go ahead and drag that down, and I'm going to go ahead and drop in 2 of those. Just like so. There we go. And let's go ahead and select Stucco 1's texture. And you can see right now it's kind of this ugly red-blue, really kind of an abrasive type of a combination there. But we want to connect this particular texture, this Stucco 1, and we want to come in to our rock texture, and we'll connect this to this color 1 input. Now we can do this a couple of ways. We can middle click and drag it over to our attribute editor just like so and connect it there. And we actually have a second one here. We can also, for color 2, middle click on Stucco 2 and drop it over here and just select color 2. And you can see how those connections get made. So now I can come in here and I can begin to adjust the colors. For Stucco 1, I'm going to come in here and kind of change this channel 1 color to kind of a bright red-orange color. Maybe something like that. And for this channel 2, I'm going to come in and change this to kind of a dark red color. Maybe something like that. All right, fantastic. Now let's go ahead and set the colors here for Stucco 2. Actually, before we do, I'm going to take this shaker value and I'm going to cut that in half. And you can see when I do, it kind of affects the preview of that stucco pattern. So let's go ahead and jump on Stucco 2 here. And for the colors for this particular stucco texture, I'm going to come in here and grab channel 1, and let's set this to maybe kind of a dark green color. Maybe something like that. All right, and for color number 2, let's go ahead and set that to kind of a medium green. So definitely not something really bright and vibrant like that, but maybe something more in the neighborhood of something like that for right now. Okay, great. We'll go ahead and cut that shaker value in half as well here. And now if we, again, come over here and hit our spacebar and jump back over to our perspective, you can see here what this is starting to look like. All right, great. So we've made a lot of progress on this. Let's go ahead and jump back over here. And I think before we begin working on kind of the next phase of this material, I want to jump into this bump node right here. And you can see my bump depth by default is set to a value of 1. I'm going to set that to a value of 4. So basically, that's going to be 4 times the amount of depth that's applied to our bump map. Okay, so this rock texture is kind of important. We used it for the bump map. We used it for the color information here. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it again, just like so. We'll come over here and maybe put it right about there. Again, middle click and drag and drop and connect to the default for this place 3D texture, so it's in exactly the same position. And for this particular node, actually let's drag this one up here. Because what I'd like to do with this one is I'd like to connect this particular node into the incandescence so we can make those areas that are recessed look like they're glowing. Now if we again middle click and drag, we can connect this right here inside the hypershade. And if we come over and select our material, you can see here that connection has now been made right over here. Now, as of right now, we don't have really any colors set in the texture to make it glow with, other than black and white, which more than likely is not going to look terrific. So maybe we can use this stucco 1 as part of the incandescence for this material. Let's give it a shot. We'll select our rock number 3 here, middle click on stucco, and let's connect it to color 1, just like so. I'll take color 2, and I'm just going to drag this all the way down so that it comes out black. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and jump back over here to our color really quickly, because when we created these 2 different stuccos, we didn't do anything with their place 3D nodes. And let me kind of show you what the result of that is. If we come back over here, save this image for comparison, and re-render, what we'll see here is that we're looking pretty good. However, this green texture, most noticeably, is really much finer than the original render. Let me just kind of scroll back to that original one. You can see how how much bigger that texture is. Now again, that relates to that place 3D texture node. So let's come over here, and for the green one, let's go ahead and grab that. And if we jump back over to our perspective, remember that's going to appear on the very center of our grid. So if we, again, grab our scale tool, let's just scale this guy up. And we'll scale that up a couple of times here, just so we can get some pretty good size. Maybe one more time. Just trying to get that a little bit above the sculpture there. That looks pretty good. Now, let's see how that affected kind of the size of this texture. I'm going to save that for comparison again and re-render. Now, based on the results of this render, it looks like I may have actually got that texture a bit too large, but I think you're starting to get the picture here. I can go ahead and adjust that maybe after the lesson. But one thing I am also noticing here is that our specular map is pretty much affecting everything on this marble, and maybe I don't want these areas that are recessed to shine with any kind of specular information. Well, in order to fix this, again, we can come back over to our hypershade here. And again, let's go ahead and duplicate our rock texture. Control D to duplicate. We'll drag it over here and middle click and drop our place 3D texture node onto it. All right, great. So with this done, let's go ahead and connect this to our material. And again, I'm going to connect this to the specular color input here. All right, fantastic. So with that change made, let me just jump back over here again, and we'll go ahead and again save for comparison and re-render this. Once that's completed, you can see here how, because of this new connection to our specular color, we don't have any specular highlights in these recessed areas. However, we have some really blown out specular highlights on the raised up surfaces. So we can fix that simply by coming into our rock 4 texture here, and maybe taking this color 2, this white color, which is controlling the intensity of those, and let's go ahead and bring that down to about 50% gray. Once we do that, if we jump back over here and re-render, what we'll see here is that our rendered result displays that those specular highlights are much, much less intense at this point. So with the exception of this green texture, which again was controlled by that place 3D texture node, we've come pretty close to our original render of this particular scene. So that's going to bring us to the end of this course devoted to your first day building shading networks here inside of Maya. Hopefully you've learned a lot. Hopefully you have enjoyed your time with me. I definitely know I've enjoyed my time here being able to show you some of the fundamental tools, techniques, and terminology when it comes to building these shading networks inside of Maya. Thanks for joining me.